So now I want to analyze the impact of a large country imposing a tariff. So in this case, we're imagining a country that is large in its import market, imposing trade restrictions, in particular a tax on imports. So with a small country, we found that it was generally a bad idea for a country to impose a tariff. With a large country, it is possible for tariffs to actually improve things, a so-called positive optimal tariff. Now we're going to start out with free trade, where P0 is the world price of the product before any trade restriction. So that zero refers to the original. Imports are the difference between Q2 and Q1. And there's an import tariff that's imposed by the domestic government. So initially, the price inside the domestic market is going to rise by the amount of the tariff, so P0 plus T. And one of the things to note about this is that the restrictions on imports are going to reduce the amount of this product that is going to be imported from the international market. So imports will fall compared to Q2 to Q1. In other words, there's going to be a shock in the world demand for this product that's going to lower the world price. So the world price is going to fall as a consequence of the reduced demand inside this large economy. So imagine if the U.S. put a tax on the importation of petroleum, that's going to potentially reduce the world demand for this product in a significant way, and the world price will fall as a consequence. So we have the original price in the world of P0W, and because of the restrictions on demand, the world price falls down to P1W. Now, that's the price on the world market. But inside this domestic economy, there's going to be a tariff placed on the world price. So the new world price plus the tariff is the new domestic price. And that's going to be the price that all of the large country agents are going to base their decisions on. The consumers and the domestic producers are going to make their decision on the new world price plus the tariff. So that new domestic price is P1W plus T. So imagine if the world price was originally $100. The imposition of the tariff raises the domestic price. The world price maybe falls down to $98. That's the P1W. The new domestic price is going to be the new world price of $98 plus a tariff, say $10. So the new domestic price is $108, the P1 plus T. Now, as I noted, the domestic effects, we're going to compare the consumer surplus and producer surplus under the original price inside the domestic economy, the free trade price of P0W, compared to the final domestic price, the price that finally is relevant inside the domestic economy of P1W plus T. So the first thing we see is that the domestic production is going to increase from Q1 to Q3 after everything has been settled out. Now note that the domestic production would have been a little bit higher if it was a small country, because you wouldn't have this reduction in the world price. So you've had an increase in domestic production and a decrease in domestic consumption from Q2 to Q4. Now again, Q3 and Q4 are based on the final price that is relevant after all of the adjustments on the world market and the domestic market take place. So let's take a look at some of the effects on various agents in the economy using the standard measures of consumer and producer surplus. Now, I've got these various areas labeled E, F, G, H, and now I want to break out the impact on the domestic consumer, the domestic producers, and the government. So first, let's think about what happens to the domestic consumers. And again, this is the domestic effects. So domestic consumers are going to have originally faced the price of P0, that's the $100. In the end, they face a price of 108. And now the 108 is obviously pulled out of the air, but we have an increase in the price to domestic consumers, and that is going to be a related consumer surplus loss of EFGH. As we've noted before, EFG are the cost to consumers that continue to buy the product even after the tariff has been imposed. H is going to be the consumers priced out of the market. So we also want to take a look at what happens to the domestic producers. Now, the domestic producers are going to clearly like this policy. They are quite possibly the source of the pressure to impose the tariffs in the first place. So you have the likelihood, even the near certainty, that domestic producers of this product are going to be happy about this. And they are happy by the measure that we have been using, which is the increase in producer surplus. That is the area defined by the difference between the original price and the final price over the supply curve. So we have a gain to producers, to domestic producers, which comes at the expense of domestic consumers. Now the question is, what happens to the government? Now, it's very tempting to just look at that area G, the area in the middle, which is often what the tariff is in the small country case. But keep in mind that the tariff revenue is the quantity of imports, Q4 to Q3, multiplied times the tariff. Now the tariff is given by the difference between P1 plus T and P1. So we have area G, which is the one aspect of the tariff. In particular, that's the part of the tariff that is paid for as a transfer from domestic consumers, very similar to the small country case. But you also have what's called a terms of trade effect. That is to say, there's going to be a part of the tariff revenue, area I, which is in effect paid for out of the pockets of the foreign exporters of this product. So G plus I is the total revenue that the government receives, but who pays for it is split between the domestic consumers and the foreign producers. So this has impact on the international market. So if we take a look at the basic welfare calculus, where we consider one domestic agent's gain and another's loss to offset each other, we have a net benefit, or a gain of I, which is the amount paid for of the tariff revenue paid for by foreigners. F and H are the standard deadweight losses associated with a tariff. So in assessing the national welfare effect, you have to compare the benefits that you get from essentially forcing foreigners to accept a lower price on for selling inside this market. That's the I. That's the terms of trade effect. that is a transfer from foreigners into the domestic treasurer, compared to the domestic inefficiencies on both the production and the consumption side associated with the higher price of the tariff. And it's quite possible that you could have a situation where the tariff revenue gain from foreigners, I, exceeds the deadweight losses. And if such a circumstance occurs, that is to say the gains from foreigners outweighs the domestic distortions, then economists will say the tariff actually makes the domestic economy better off. In fact, if you maximize the difference between the effects on foreigners and the distortions, you can have what's called the optimal tariff. That's the optimal amount that the domestic government should increase tariffs in order to take full advantage of what is its market power in the international economy. In other words, for the small country, the optimal tariff is 0. For the large country, it actually can make sense to unilaterally increase tariffs. Now, this situation is particularly important for a country like the United States, which does play a large role in the world economy. And there's this temptation, if you will, to use its market position to gain at the expense of foreign competitors. But there are some really important practical difficulties associated with this optimal tariff that is being considered here. One is the amount of information that's needed. If you take a look at the graph again, it'll be clear that the impact of the tariff depends on the market's reaction internationally and the domestic market's reaction, which means that it's critical to know the supply and demand elasticities both domestically and internationally. And that is not something that you can just pick up the Wall Street Journal and get. You have to try and get a sense of what these international reactions would be just on the market. You also have the distinct possibility that a foreign government might retaliate as a consequence. Remember, the benefit coming from this is because you have taken money out of the pocket of the foreign exporters. And a government may react by imposing its own restrictions against, say, the United States. This is a lot of the difficulties in U.S.-China or U.S.-European or European-Chinese trade. Big countries who see a trade restriction and retaliate, and where it can actually make things worse off for both countries. Now, the other aspect of this that's important to note is that there's this supposed benefit to the government, but there's still this burden placed on consumers. The losses associated with the higher prices is still affecting consumers in a negative way. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is what is the international impact of this policy. We've hinted at this already. For the foreign producers of the product, they not only are selling this product for a lower price inside the economy that has imposed the tariff, they're losing revenue from worldwide sales of this product because the world price falls. So it's not only the impact inside the large country, it's on the international market as a whole. For foreign consumers, they like this. They get a lower price for this product. So once again, you have this divergence between the consumers and producers.